Hey everybody, welcome to Season 3 of Song Revolution. Get ready to ramp up your songwriting. Hey everybody, welcome back to Song Revolution. We are all about empowering you to fulfill your passionate calling to write amazing songs for Jesus, to get them recorded and get them out to the world where they belong. So thanks for tuning in. We are dedicated to empowering you, dropping as much value on you as we can in each episode. I hope you've been following along. This has been a great month so far. We started off, Bryant, Urich, and I started off the month with the power of knowing styles and genres. I hope you enjoyed Claire Bacon last week. She is the woman with the perfect last name, and she is one of the newest members of our NCS staff. She comes to us from Bethel Music and Pure Mosaic Music. She's helping us in A&R and publishing and project management, and I thought she just brought the value last week. So if you missed that one, go back and check out Claire. And next week, I'll go ahead and foreshadow a little bit of next week. We have none other than Clark Beckham from American Idol, runner-up, I'm not sure, season 14, I think he was. And man, that guy brings micro moments of incredible flow. I'll make sure that's the right phrase. Anyway, it's a great episode. You're going to love Clark Beckham next week. So this is May. We're talking about genres and styles. I got my buddy Bryant, the man, Urich, here today. Bryant, man, you got the hat on. World tour.
I want a last name like hat. Bacon.
Yeah, you do.
Man, how do you beat that?
Pancetta.
Jeez. Oh,
Bryant Pancetta.
You just beat it. That's great.
I just beat it.
Let's do that.
Isn't that kind of a bacon? Isn't that a ham?
That's like a fancy bacon.
Fancy bacon.
Yeah.
Bryant Fancy Bacon Pancetta. All right, enough silliness, but it's been kind of a long day around here. But okay, so I thought today we could talk about writing in our best genre, and we pointed out in our first episode this month that maybe some of the ways that people listening today could find their genre is look at what they listen to.
Yeah.
And what they love, right?
Yeah.
What would you, I mean, you're very eclectic, so I'm not sure that you could even identify a genre or style that you love the most. Could you?
I'm a bad one to ask.
You are, I know that. I know you well enough to know that's like not right.
I mean, I love a wide range of stuff, but always goes back to just like singer-songwriter, great songwriting, great like a Ben Rector or a
Dave Barnes.
Yeah, Dave Barnes is great. Like I really love that's probably my home base, and then everything else kind of goes from there. Yeah.
So one of our favorite humans on the planet is Jordy Searcy, and Jordy's toured with Ben Rector, we've known Jordy and his parents, you know, since way before he was even born. Did a lot of church together, a lot of worship together. I managed George Searcy at Integrity Music, and I think he and I have written probably 200 songs together that have gone all over the world. But Jordy is a phenomenal singer-songwriter. Love and War in Your 20s is kind of his big breakout song, and he, like I said, he's toured with Ben Rector. Great example, I think, of someone who's dedicated himself to his craft. Jordy, big shout out to you. You know, kudos. He's worked hard. I mean, that guy. I mean, we would see him, you know, watching YouTubes and figuring out fingering on the guitar, and he just established himself in that indie. I guess it's folk. I mean, it's kind of an interesting hybrid. Ben Rector and
it's pop. Guys. It's got influences from a lot of different things, but he's just a great songwriter. So it just it kind of flows from there. Yeah.
Now we were talking earlier, kind of off camera, that these days there are mashups of different genres and styles, so maybe it's not as cut and dry for people. Do you remember what you were talking about around that topic?
Yeah, just people releasing different styles, like kind of almost to throw a curveball to like their fans, you know? And what's funny, I mean, you still have to identify your music, right? As you're like releasing it and putting it out, you still have to pick the top 3 genres that describe it. But and there's a list. It's not like 500 different genres. It's pretty curated, when you release music. But yeah, we were talking about just bigger, iconic pop, like a Post Malone, who's a secular pop artist, released a country record last year, I think, or within the last couple years. You have like Kanye West doing gospel. You have just these like crossover, and maybe it's shock value. Maybe it's just they got bored with their other styles and they just want to try something different. So there's a bit of that happening right now for sure.
Well, speaking of shock value,
yeah,
I am older than dirt. I bring that up every time, but
hey, I didn't say it this time.
I know. Back in my day,
yeah.
Can you get my cane, please? But just the other day, I've released probably the most experimental song I ever have in my entire career, called White Flag.
Yep.
And it is not 90s integrity worship. It is, it's my good buddy Sam Hart, who is a Curb word writer and producer, produced this song. And it was co-written with one of our collective artists, Bonnie Barbet and Brant Colella, who's been hanging out with us. And we really kind of did a little bit of a nod to The Weeknd.
Yeah.
Bright Lights. Is it Bright Lights? That's the one,
Bright
isn't
Lights.
it?
Yeah, I think so.
I think that's what it's called. You guys behind the scenes, I think it's I know it's The Weeknd. I think it's Bright Lights. But anyway, it's got it's very pop for the old guy
very
here.
Pop.
And so artists do that, right? They'll throw in a little left hook every now and then just to wake people up and say, hey, I can do something a little bit different. And
yeah, why not?
Might not be like the trajectory necessarily, but just kind of fun. So.
Well, and I think the barrier to releasing music has gotten so much lower, right? Not like quality, but like used to, you would put tons of money and time and effort into creating a record, a vinyl record. So it's like now you can kind of just make a song and throw it out on the internet. So it's easier to do that.
And that's good and bad. That's a double-edged sword because there's no quality control anymore. Back in my day, when I was at Star Song Media and then at Integrity, I was the quality control guy. And you didn't get a song on a particular album if it didn't go through my specifications, right? And now there are no barriers. It's like anybody in the next 10 minutes can upload a song off of their phone and it could go viral or it could just go into the sea of mediocrity.
Yep.
And that's a lot of what we're about. And why we do this show anyway is to help people really begin to identify their best shot at being heard, right? And you guys, Eau Claire, you've got a song coming out this summer that's a bit of a left turn for you from your indie folk cinematic roots to a little insanity.
Yeah, a little indie rock, guitar, crazy thing. Yeah, it's going to be really fun.
One camera video that is bizarrely awesome.
Yeah. Camera guy trips about 3/4 of the way through and the camera just
it's
jolts.
So good.
Yeah, I think we were talking earlier about just like context, right? Like when you're going in to write a song, I think that a lot of writers, a lot even people in our community, they'll sit down to write and get a little frustrated because they don't come out with something or they don't have like a clear plan. So going into your writing session, whether it's by yourself or with a group, having context and vision for why you're writing a song is important, right? So, and genre and style play into that because if you know what style or type of song you're going to be writing, it gives you at least some sort of like parameters to be able to not just fall prey to like the, endless possibilities that are music making. So yeah, having that at least like guiding thing is helpful.
Music is vast.
Yeah.
The continuum of music is unbelievably huge. There's no way you could get your mind around everything. And so I think it's important to, what you were mentioning earlier, I think is fantastic, that when you sit down to write, if you have a vision for the style and the genre or your why, that's so important that you even imagine your audience. Who would be the audience for this song?
Yeah.
Because anybody can put words to music. Anybody could do that has any little bit of musical talent.
Yep.
But it takes a lot of craft to put together, to assemble a song that can break through in any genre or style and communicate to someone's heart. It takes a lot of work. And we talk about pre-writing around here a lot, and what that means in researching, and we're doing that now, talking about genre and style, to have a target focus. Like we work with Anya Lee. She's one of the artists on the NCS Collective. And we've shared some of her music on some of the last podcasts. She's been on the show recently. And she's going for kind of an urban gospel. How would you describe, what she's doing? I would say more urban gospel,
pop,
/ CCM
hip-hop,
pop.
It's got all kinds of elements.
A little bit of a fusion there, but definitely is fresh, and she has a focus in her ministry because she did die on the Appalachian Trail and was brought back to life. And she has this mission to share that there's no reason to fear. She's one of the songs that came out in January. It's called Back Again. It's one of my favorite, that she's released. But it's about a fearless style of living, a fearlessness in Jesus, because you have purpose, you have a reason, you have resurrection life. So she knows what she's going after topically. So now it's fashioning it in a way that people can receive it.
Yeah, and she kind of had to throw some ideas at the wall, right, in the beginning to figure out really what her lane was. So she worked with a few different producers. She wrote with different people and kind of got her feet wet in different areas to figure out, I really like this lane. I really like this style. It's natural. You were talking about writing for your best genre. It's like you find that in that moment of like flow, right? You're like, this is what I want to do. This is what I lose track of time doing because it's so easy. It just flows out of you.
What did Clark say the other day when he was here? It was so brilliant. I mean, that shows
moments of flow state.
Micro moments of flow state. That was so brilliant.
Yeah.
You guys are going to love that show coming out next week. He's a brilliant musician, soul singer. And doing some beautiful work. But
and he's a great example of genre and style, right?
Yeah.
Because he's releasing these like, what would you call it? Gospel renditions,
soul R&B,
R&B versions of popular worship songs, and people are loving it. They're eating it up because it's his natural lean musically, but then he puts that spin on songs that people love already, and it resonates.
Because his voice is astronomically amazing.
Insane.
It's like, I hate him. He's so good. He's such a great, great vocalist and just off the charts, but he's reimagining some of the popular worship songs of the day, and it gives it a whole different spin, but it takes it out of the modern worship and puts it in more of a soul. Like when you think of Ray Charles, or you think of some of the great soul singers. So that's he, and artists that we work with like Anya really have to find their place. And I wanted to mention, a lot of the writers that we coach struggle to write a song in a month. Some writers struggle to write a song in a year. And I totally know that it's because they don't have the skills yet. Pro writers can write how many songs in a day, 2, 3, 4 if they wanted to.
Sure.
2 would be very easy, right? But it's because they and we have the skills to do that. So a lot of what we're about is to help these writers understand enough about genre and style and formatting and all the stuff, so that they can become more prolific. Because you said Anya did a lot of writing before she started recording and releasing, and it's the way it ought to be, right?
Yeah.
So
here's a question: What about a songwriter or an artist who wants to write a song in a style or genre that feels natural to them, but then they're frustrated that song is not successful or commercially successful? Does that make sense?
I think so.
What would you say to someone who's like, this is the style, maybe it's 50s doo-wop that I want to write in, but I also want it to be commercially successful?
I think that's the challenge that we face as writers and artists, because what we might love, say a doo-wop style, isn't necessarily in vogue. But I think of Francesca Battistelli, who wrote, I can see the video where she was breaking up with fear. I think it was Breaking Up with Fear. You guys maybe look that up real quick. Francesca Battistelli. And it's been a number of years back, but it's kind of a doo-woppy song that was a big hit for her. And the whole thing, it's called the breakup song. And that's what it was called.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I remember that.
And so she was breaking up with fear. And the whole thing is like she's dancing around singing with a hairbrush and she's calling fear on the phone and breaking up.
Yeah.
You know, and so it was really a cute song, but it was definitely a doo-wop song. So every now and then, I think of some of the songs that maybe New Song has done. Eddie Carswell and New Song have done a little bit of that vocal bandy doo-wop things. The Gaither Vocal Band back in the day would do things like that. So there is a time and a place every now and then for a good 50s doo-wop song. But it's going to be a little fewer and further between that kind of a thing, right? And so I think your basic question was, what if you write in a genre that's not popular? What do you do? Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess it comes down to your why. You know, are you doing it for fun? Is it a hobby? Are you doing it for family and friends? Are you doing it for your own artistry? Like we were talking about White Flag a minute ago, my new single out this month. I did it for me. You know, people might think it's ridiculous. I don't care. I've had mixed reviews on it, but I love it. It's fun. And I really enjoyed writing it with Bonnie and Brant Colella, and we just had a great time producing it with Sam Hart. So, you know, and I'm kind of in a place where I can experiment with that a little bit. So I think it's contextual, right?
Yeah, that's what it's supposed to be, right? That's why we all love music in the first place, is to have fun and to make things that we, you know, if you're coming into it, and that's why I asked that question, because we have people who are like, that could be a frustration point, right? Of like, I'm writing all these songs, but nothing is resonating. Because I'm writing in a style that no one really is listening to right now. So you have to gauge your expectations based on, you know, the time and place that your music's being created, you know.
Very good points. Well, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll try to identify some more insights that our writers can put to use in their own writing. Guys, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. What would it feel like to have 52 weeks of access to the right people in Nashville? People who've been making music for decades. People who can answer every question that you have about what pro-level music making is all about. Well, you can get that and more by joining NCS Community. Our community is a group of worldwide dedicated Christian songwriters who want what you want, to glorify God with your gifts and to get your music out there. I hope that you'll consider joining NCS Community today. All right, guys, we're back for the second half of today's show. Bryant Urich is here with me. Great songwriter, great producer, leader of the band Eau Claire, who's joining the NCS Collective and releasing some amazing music this year. I think their first single is coming out. You, Me, the Kids is coming out, I think, next week, May 30th, I think is, if you watch this at a later date, go back and look for it on Spotify and the YouTube and the interwebs. It's all out there. But we've been talking about genre and style because one of the greatest challenges for the songwriters that we work with, especially as they are newer or younger in their journey in songwriting, is to identify a genre. And we've talked about genres as being kind of an overarching kind of category, if you will, like country music has all kinds of subcategories and styles within country. Worship has a jillion different kinds of styles, everything from very traditional to very modern. And we could talk about even orchestral music, which I have some background in. Classical music itself has different styles, even within different eras, if you will, of, you know, classical music. So every great genre has different styles. So how do you figure out where you belong and then do your best writing within that?
Yeah, we were just talking before the break about having context for your write, you know, when you go in to write a song. And then what flows out of you naturally? What are your influences? What are you inspired by in the moment to, you know, really influence what you're writing next? I think a question from a lot of our writers is how to find their own unique genre or style within the kind of like pre-selected genres that are out there, you know? So how would you approach that for a writer who's trying to find their unique spot inside of a style or genre?
That is a great question. And the first thing I would say is that no writer on earth is probably going to invent a new style.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm old enough to remember when punk was like, that was new. And now our intern Jack just mentioned vaporwave. I don't even know. I know what vaping is. I don't do it, but I know what that is. But who knows what that even is? But we were talking in the break about that. And it's like, okay, that's a little weird. But no one is probably going to invent a new genre, or even if they do, it's not going to magically, explode into a big genre. It takes years and decades for. I mean, I remember when Bob Dylan was like new. That was my childhood.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a very musical family, and I was allowed to listen to stuff I would have never allowed my kid, to listen to. But I listened to everything. And I grew up in a house where we heard everything from symphonic to bluegrass, everything from Mahler to Flatt and Scruggs. And the bands of my childhood were Jethro Tull and Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, just crazy acid influenced, lots of dope smoking, went on in those days. I was alive when the Dark Side of the Moon Pink Floyd album came out. That was the soundtrack of my childhood, and I had the blessing of understanding, or at least being exposed to a lot of music. And I find that sometimes writers are kind of stuck in one place and they don't have broad listening habits, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think that there's one answer to your question of how. I think it really is, as we were saying before the break, is very contextual. It's about asking yourself the better question of who am I trying to reach? Who would be the audience for my song? A lot of times writers will bring a song to me and it really is flavorless. It really isn't targeted enough, so it meanders, but I'm not even sure that it has a genre. It just comes across as words put to a random melody, and it doesn't really have any kind of melodic hook. We talk a lot about lyric hooks, but melodies are hooky too, right? You think of, we've been loving kind of the new Coldplay album, which is a little bit of a nod back to Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, some of the transitions that they do, but that definitely has a very specific pop, cinematic in some places. Really a bit like Eau Claire, kind of some of the things you guys do. But we love that record because it's such a great sonic experience, right? I'm kind of wandering from the question, and I don't mean to.
No, I
not
think
sidestepping it.
I think you're onto something, because it's like you said, writers sending in a song where it's very vanilla, basic, almost like informational, where it's like you really didn't think about who was going to listen to this song before you wrote it down, because it's like, Jesus said, "Go and make disciples of every nation." Like, it's just like literally taking the Bible, which is there's a place for that.
If it's a scripture memory song.
But it's like, if it's just like you're just taking words from one place to another and just putting them on paper and then trying to make a melody. It's, again, I'm all for scripture songs that are, thoughtful and like brought to life in a certain way, but just be careful to not fall into that trap of like you talked about pre-writing, or just like thinking about this song. If this song were to be performed, who would like it besides me? And if it's just you, that's fine. Like that's what art is, right? Just creating what inspires you. But I think some people get stuck in that kind of hamster wheel of trying to just write a song to write a song, versus like we're creating art that should and can move people.
And I think we live in kind of this funny paradox, because the music we write we should love, but if we don't understand the audience that we're targeting, then it's just maybe it's just for a hobby and just for fun and just something that you want to write for yourself. We just
Yeah.
interviewed Sarah Kroger, and her new album, A New Reality, that came out last year. She wrote that more cathartically. It was really more about what she was going through in her own journey, and she wrote those songs for herself. And they just happened to be, oh yeah, pretty cool CCM and worship.
Yeah.
So it works, right, for the
Yeah.
for the label she was on and all that. So that's cool. I've known a writer who just wrote songs for her children. That's all she really wanted to do, and so she never really wanted to be a CCM artist. Her audience was really for her children, and that's great. That's awesome. But when you think about pre-writing consists of knowing your why, knowing your audience, and really doing some research. And I think one of the things, especially in Christian music, is we feel the inspiration and we feel like that's enough. And it's really not. You can't just feel inspired and think that the world is going to feel the same inspiration that you felt. I don't mean to be snarky when I say that people won't love your songs just because you love Jesus.
Right.
I don't mean it as snarky as it might sound. I really don't.
Right. Yeah, there are basic things in songs that make them memorable or make them catchy, make them a song versus just a spoken word, piece or read scripture aloud. So yeah, I think there's definitely fundamentals that you have to learn and go by, especially in the early days of getting started, to figure out then how to break the rules down the road if you want to, do something weird, do a different genre, try something different.
Yeah.
But you definitely have to have those fundamentals.
You have to know the rules before you can break them.
Yeah.
What do you look for, like when you're critiquing a song? What would be the top one or two things you're looking for in the way of form? Let's just say, I don't know, maybe you've just produced Howard Grip on our label. You work with the Ezra Worship Initiative on some of their songs.
Yeah.
The Eau Claire band, that you do. I mean, what are some of the top one or two things that you look for just the very first time you hear a song?
I think it's do I believe it or not is a big one. Just like, what is this person trying to say? How are they saying it? And does it move me or do I believe what
But is
they're
it
saying?
because of the title? Is it because of the way the chorus works?
It's usually like the feeling of the song, even if it's just a basic piano vocal thing. I'm less like, I could look at lyrics and look at a form of a song and be like, oh, this is a little strange. But I think without the context of hearing it, I would never critique a song just based on, obviously, because it's lyrics and melody, right? That makes the song. So I'm definitely more on the side of like, how does this flow? How does this come across? Than I am like structure. And you're actually way better at critiquing the like form and structure. I've learned that from you to say like, hey, this could be more the repetition here could be more catchy than, or the alliteration using these same letters is really helpful. Or so there are things that, again, you learn the basics, you learn the fundamentals. But for me, it's usually always comes from the feeling of like, how does the song feel? And then I can take that feeling and then expand on that as a producer and go, okay, well, if it makes me feel like this when it's tiny, let's see what we can add to it to really bring that out of it.
But you think cinematically and you think producer.
Yeah.
You write as a producer. That's your brain. And I write more as a pastor teacher.
Yeah.
And so when I'm critiquing a lyric, I'm looking for what is the one big idea that this writer is trying to convey.
Yep.
And often I have to wade through 17 ideas to get to the one that's the best, right?
Yeah.
And then I will try to tease out what of the lyric, and I do start with lyric. To me, music, it's not secondary, but it can come second for me, right? Because I'm looking for, is there a killer title, killer hook, which, by the way, that's going to be our topic for all of June. All of next month is going to be about killer titles and hooks. So we're going to spend a whole month on this. Is my favorite, angle on songwriting. And it's what's won for me over all these years is being able to identify a killer hook and title. And I think that there's science and art behind that. We're going to talk all about that next month, so I'm very excited. But I always go to the lyric. I just go there first. Even if I haven't listened to the song, I can go through, scroll through a lyric, and I can look at the way it's formatted on a page and pretty much tell if the writer has any kind of contrast between the syllable count in the first verse and the chorus. There should be contrast here.
Yeah.
Or I can look at it, and if it's all blocky and if it's all just the same thing over, if it's a modern hymn, okay, because that's a strophic style. You think of Amazing Grace, all of the syllable count is exactly alike, the line count, the melody is exactly the same in a hymn style. That's called strophic. But if it's a modern worship song or if it's a pop song, right, that shouldn't be strophic normally. It might be, but not normally. So I can look at it and see what kind of contrast I'm seeing and then go from there. And then I look for that thread. What's the title? How have they supported that hook in the chorus? And I'm kind of jumping up to next month. I don't mean to be doing that, but that's where I go because just like you're saying, you're looking for how the song makes you feel. I'm looking for that from a theological standpoint, an emotional standpoint, like you, but more from the lyric. Like, what space is this inviting me into? And how well have they supported that throughout the song? Or have they just confused me because they were so inspired they threw every religious phrase they could think of into the song?
Yeah.
Right?
What's funny is songwriting, I think, came secondary to me just loving music. So I was the church kid who'd be like, but Mom, I don't even listen to the lyrics. I'm listening to whatever fill in the blank rock band and I'm like, oh, but I love the way this sound, this guitar, these drums, I'm definitely listening to the lyrics, but my excuse to my mom was that. But but then, now really honing in the last decade on songwriting and just absorbing that and really becoming, trying to become a better songwriter. That's the thing I go to most now is just thinking about the song and the idea and the structure. And it's definitely.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Didn't mean to cut you off.
You're good.
And so don't you think marinating in this stuff is the best way to begin to learn it? I mean, that's why we do our community. That's why we do the podcast. That's why we're providing all of this is so that the writers, you're not going to learn it all in a day. You're not going to learn it all in a week or a month, maybe not even a year. But if you marinate yourself in these principles and these insights, I've watched it. I've coached probably over 350 people, writers in our NCS Pro Song Mastery program over the 10 years that we've had it. And what's fun is when people come back even several years later and they're like, I get it, and listen to these songs. And it's like, oh yeah, you get it. It just takes a while for it to soak into your system to where you can bring it back out.
Yeah, definitely.
So.
Yeah, the more you can bring in, the inputs, your output is going to be like a mashup of all of that.
Yeah.
So if you want to learn how to write songs, listen to as much of this podcast as you can. Dive into other songwriters and just absorb as much as possible. If you want to learn about genre and find your own unique genre, like we're talking about, then absorb as many genres as possible. Widen your listening field of what artists you're listening to.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's so good. And co-write is a huge thing. We've just had our May co-write, our spring co-writing retreat. It was off the chains, absolutely amazing. Great coaches, great attendees. Some great songs have come out of that, and we're going to be planning another retreat in the fall. So I'll go ahead and drop that little seed into our listeners today. We'll be announcing that sometime soon, so we're going to be announcing those dates. But if you want to come to Nashville and even learn more, come to one of our co-writing retreats.
Definitely.
All right, Bryant, this has been great. Let's land the plane for today.
Yep.
And that wraps up May in talking about styles and genres. And then, as I said, next month, beginning next week, we're going to be talking about killer ideas and unforgettable titles. We're going to break that down so that you can incorporate that into your songwriting. As always, go check out the NCS Collective on Spotify, on YouTube. Watch the videos, like and share them. On Spotify, please download, please playlist those songs, share them out. Give us some love so that we can spread the news of Jesus' love through Nashville Christian songwriters. All the pertinent links are in the show notes. Thank you. Big shout out to Kyle Kicker, who's helping us with that. Jack Landis, our intern who works on the show. We appreciate you guys behind the scenes. Without you, it would be impossible. But check out all those links. Jump into our free first Monday of the month songwriter training that's happening next week, our June session. Join the NCS community and let's ramp this thing up. Time is short. It's time to get busy. All right. You guys have a great day. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us on today's show. If you got some value, please help us share the love. Leave a like and a share and a good review. Be sure to check out everything that we have to offer you at NashvilleChristianSongwriters.com. We'll see you next time.